So vague spoilers for anyone who hasn't played through Persona 3 DLC. Today we're gonna watch this video. It's called Why Persona 3 Reload Matters. Again, sorry about the spoilers if you haven't played through Persona 3 Reload. If you haven't, maybe it's a good idea to not watch it, but I do want to share some hype with Persona 3 because tomorrow we're gonna be playing through the answer. I'm very excited for the DLC, and I want to talk about this a little bit as I recently made a very similar video on my channel as well, and it's called What Persona as a franchise that is means to me. And I talked about my experience with Persona 3 and Persona 4 and my plans with Persona 5 as well. So if you're interested in that, you can find it on Vplays. But I want to see another content creator's take on how they feel about Persona 3 and what they liked or didn't like, and if they have some insight into like the original Persona 3 game and why Persona 3 Reload is in a way better or more advanced than the original game. I would like to watch this as well. Now, let's watch.
There's a quiet loneliness that pervades in the first few hours of Persona 3 Reload. Yes, there are monsters and ghouls and battles against spooky enemies, but when the dark hour ends and you're left to your own devices in the real world, you're just a school student, the new kid, with no actual friends and nobody to spend time with. It's become a mainstay of the Persona formula to make the player feel out of place and unwanted at the start of each game. This isolation is paramount to the game franchise's repeated narrative arc.
See, that's the funny thing about this experience. I've never felt that, probably because I streamed the game, and when you stream the game, it's just a little bit of a different experience because even though, yes, now that I think about it, there is that little bit of loneliness at the beginning, but when you're there with the chat, when you're vibing, when you're talking, it didn't even occur to me that I'm supposed to, feel lonely. So that's kind of a weird experience when it comes to streaming.
As you grow from a lonely outsider to develop lasting friendships with those around you, slowly finding your place in a society that wasn't sure if it wanted you at first. To start off though, this feeling of abandonment can be overwhelming, whether this is your first Persona game or whether you're already a card-carrying member of the Phantom Thieves. If Persona 3 Reload isn't your first time with this franchise, you might find yourself missing your old friends. You might wonder whether you'll actually connect with this new game as well as you did with the previous ones. All of which is an excellent facsimile of how it feels to be the new kid at school, not yet sure of your place in the world. As a new player of Persona 3 Reload then, you may find yourself wandering around aimlessly at the start. Turfed out of school classes and simply told to meander your time away until the next big fight, you have no friends to hang out with, no club meeting.
Okay, I think he's overstating it a little bit. Yes, you're the new kid and whatnot, but you immediately have some social links or whatever. I don't think it's that dramatic. Like, I get it. It's a bit lonely, and yes, maybe I had a little bit of a different experience because I streamed it, but it's really not that bad. Like, the game doesn't really tell you that nobody wants you because every day you are meeting new people. You can choose to like reply to their little texts, go and see them. It's just not really like that.
To attend. So, you wander. You explore shopping centres and arcades. You stumble into a cluttered, dusty bookshop where you meet two of the game's earliest supporting characters, Bunkichi and Mitsuko.
Aww.
Each Persona game has its own way of making the player feel lonely at the start. In Persona 3, your character is an orphan with no family, no home, no permanent place in life. At a time then when you're struggling to make new friends, this elderly couple, Bunkichi and Mitsuko, become the surrogate family you need in that moment. At a time when nobody else in the game seems to care too much about you one way or the other.
Yeah, I also didn't feel outsidey either. I mean, I get his point, but it's not that bad. Like the game, I feel like the video in a way is kind of making the game sound empty, like you have nothing to do, like you're just going around or whatever, and that's not the case at all. There's always something to do, and holy shit, the grandparents, like just seeing them makes me want to cry. Holy shit, the memories.
The other, the elderly couple are there to ask you about your day, to shower you in affection, and occasionally to give you sweets. The game doesn't so much guide you to them as it lets you stumble upon them of your own accord, but it's clear that they're meant to be among the first friends you make in your new home. And yet, something feels off. There's a sadness behind their eyes. A casual comment here, an awkward glance there. There is something that your elderly new friends aren't telling you. Then the tragic truth comes out. The reason this couple has taken such a shine to you is because you remind them of their son, a memorial for whom is planted in the grounds of your school. If it weren't clear already by this point in the game, the central theme of Persona 3 crystallizes in this moment. This is not just a coming-of-age story about growing up and finding your place in the world. It's also a story about confronting and learning to live with.
This is why there's that mechanic of listening in to other students talking, because at the beginning of each day, you actually hear them saying what's new, where you should be going, what you should be doing, and you don't feel like the game is talking directly to you. But for every day, like, I've never felt lost. Never. You have your phone, you have your tips on what you can do. The only thing that you need to remember is what they actually said, so that after class you can be like, do you remember at the beginning they said that there's this or there's that? The game doesn't hold your hand, but it gives you all these clues.
The inescapable shadow of death. Video games as a whole have a complicated relationship with the concept of mortality. There's a certain flippancy in the way many games deal with death. This is a natural result of death being thrown around so casually, as a default fail state in a large number of games going back all the way to the arcade coin-op days. Oh, you died. Never mind. Pop 20p or 50p back into the machine and you can just try again. Or, once games moved into the home through consoles and computers, simply hit restart. Death is not permanent. It's nothing more than a temporary inconvenience. Eventually, many games would give up on a kind of penalty for death whatsoever. You start back almost exactly where you left off. Death in such games is nothing more than a slap on the wrist, not even worth worrying about.
This video didn't need a spoiler warning, it needed an epilepsy warning.
Perhaps because of this cavalier attitude towards death, games have always struggled to show the trauma, the processing of grief and loss in a believable manner. Take, for example, what is perhaps the most famous death in all of video games. Yes, it's a shocking moment within the narrative, but at
Spoilers for what?
the same time, the player has a stack of Phoenix down in their pocket that usually cures death outright. Or the oft-memed moment in which a soldier stands at the grave of a
Are you talking about Aerith?
and the player is instructed to press F to pay respects. Even when played completely straight, video game death is little more than a narrative beat, and the process of healing emotionally from a tragic loss is distilled down into a single contextual button prompt. All of this is not to say that video game character death cannot be impactful or emotional, inasmuch as the player is willing to invest in them. But even the most heartbreaking game death isn't truly permanent when the player can simply start a new save and bring their digital friend back to life. Perhaps it's for this reason that many gamers have long sought ways to make deaths more meaningful in their games. The hard mode or Nuzlocke run in Pokemon games is an excellent example of this. Players arbitrarily choosing to remove the game's inbuilt euphemism, treating each defeat in battle as a death rather than a fainting, and forcing themselves to retire a Pokemon that runs out of hit points. Doing so not only makes the game harder, it also makes the game more painful. Players bond and invest in a digital character that's barely more than a sprite and a set of numbers.
It's effectively a challenge mode.
Feelings and emotions and personalities into these characters that we've invented ourselves. We seek out moments of grief and
Romancy Saga 2 has death, but your successor follows your footsteps. How does that work?
pain. We inflict this trauma upon ourselves. Why? Because doing so makes the game more meaningful. It makes our triumphs all the sweeter, but, just as important, it gives us an opportunity to roleplay grief in a safe, clearly defined space. Because, for the most part,
oh, in Persona 3 Reload, you do roleplay grief, but you do not feel safe. Like, the way the Persona 3 kind of gets you to feel grief, you forget that you're playing a video game. That's the most horrifying, I think, feature of Persona 3 Reload. You forget that these people are not real. It is actually so painful.
Games typically shy away from letting the player use these spaces as a way to process our real-world fears surrounding the impermanence of life on Earth. Death comes for us all. This is the simple, sometimes overstated message of Persona 3. Most noticeably, this is seen in the overarching plot of the game. You and your high school friends are humanity's only defense against the end of the world, and an all-powerful being that is planning to consume all of existence. Thus, faced with a brewing apocalypse, we see how different people react to being confronted with their own mortality. Some people hide from it, pretending that nothing's wrong. Others collapse in despair, unable to even move, the anxiety and fear and dread becoming so tangible. So far, so common in video games. None of this is a million miles away from other games about death, such as The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask. What Persona 3 does different with this familiar doomsday setting is the twist on the formula. Yes, there are deaths coming in the near future. In addition to this though, almost every major character in the game is still struggling with deaths that have already happened. As noted, your player character in Persona 3 is an orphan. They are living on a daily basis.
So what Persona 3 Reload, in my opinion, does in a very realistic way is exactly this. Like, yes, people die, but you know how, let's say in Final Fantasy VII, spoilers, when I don't know, when Aerith dies, yes, everyone's sad or whatever, but after a while people kind of in the party don't really talk about it all the time or whatever. But here you actually feel grief as if it was real. You feel like as if it happened, because if you know that someone is struggling with something, with a loss or whatever, you're going to encounter the struggle every single time, and you're just going to be reminded over and over and over again how much pain they're in. And I know it's popular for, the heroes or whatever to kind of, put the pain aside and go save the world and whatnot. But Cloud is a little different, in my opinion. Cloud is very stoic, and he has his own trauma that I think, even though it really hurts him as a person, it also helps him put things aside and be able to deal with things while he's out there saving the world. So from in my opinion, he is a bit of an exception there. In P3, they really, really emphasize how painful it is to actually lose someone, and you keep, you keep not just having the conversations about it that hurt you, but that also heal you. You can actually witness the process of people going from grief to kind of healing and acceptance. And this goes for both young and old characters. And if you've ever lost someone, like, the game really hurts deep when you play it, but I feel like the game also offers the opportunity to help you get a little bit of closure on some of the things that have happened to you as well. This is kind of how I felt about Persona 3, and why for me it was a very valuable experience. Death in this game are more or less pinnacle of the game message, and they would linger on it. Yeah, exactly, and that makes it really real.
With the fallout from the loss of their family and the kind of isolation and loneliness that this creates. To them, death is not an abstract thing to be avoided. They live with the consequences of death every single day. As you go through the game, you discover that the elderly couple are far from the only non-player characters that are still processing some form of loss. Whether this loss was recent or not doesn't matter. In all cases, the pain is still very raw. Spend enough time with practically anyone and they'll tell you about the person or the life that they are grieving. Take, for example, the young man with a terminal illness who's trying to come to terms with all the moments he won't get to experience. Or the companion character who's left in perpetual limbo over her late father's legacy because of the questions about his actions before his death that she will simply never learn the answers to. Persona 3 is a rarity in gaming because of its unashamed focus on the mourning process, on how it feels to lose someone, and on the difficult journey that it takes to heal from this separation. Death is not just a fail state here, nor is it a threat that must be averted. Death in Persona 3 is a constant companion, often, in several ways, literally. Death
true.
Cannot be avoided. It lingers just out of sight, but never out of mind. When exploring Tartarus, if the player dawdles a little too long in any one place, they'll be pursued by the literal embodiment of death, the Grim Reaper itself. To fight death...
Well, I mean, this applies to other Persona games as well. It's not exclusive to Persona 3 Reload, but it's very fitting also. No, the game is very dark, but it's beautiful in a way that it tells these stories. It's it really helps heal in a way.
To try to beat it is almost entirely pointless. Most players are better off running and hiding rather than trying to fight death head on. Death's presence must be embraced, accepted. You can't win this fight, except when you can. While not exactly an easy fight for a Persona novice, under the right conditions, death can be beaten when it appears in Tartarus. Indeed,
I love how now he's suddenly talking about combat. Yeah, until you get Messiah. I actually have Messiah, so once we go and kill the Reaper, hopefully with Messiah I'll be able to do it.
skilled and well-prepared players will make a goal of challenging death head on. If you're skilled and lucky enough to defeat death, you're rewarded for your trouble. It drops some of the rarest, most powerful items in the game. As in real life, we all have to face it, and nobody can escape from its painful consequences.
Is it a spoiler to ask if death is a common theme focused in Persona games? Well, obviously I haven't played all of them, but in some, yes. In Persona 3, very strongly. In Persona 4, I mean, death is a common theme, is the theme of the game, but in a different way, because technically it is a murder mystery and it is about, you know, a serial killer technically, but they talk about death in a different way. It's more of a mystery game than a game about grief and about loss. So every one of them has, you know, death, but I think they talk about it in a different way. I think the movie helped flesh out the MC as someone who has no direction and goes on to adrenaline junkie to accepting the mortality of life. I found the Persona 3 Reload, like the movies, to be quite similar to the game itself, but I really did enjoy the additions and how they presented the characters, and yeah, I can somewhat agree with that.
Consequences. This, though, doesn't mean you have to like it. It doesn't mean you can't push back, overcome its influence, heal from its wounds. At first glance, Persona 3 Reload feels somewhat fatalist in its message. You can't run from death. It will find you. Square your shoulders though, take a breath and work through your grief, and you learn something new. That you can't avoid death, but you can overcome it. You can heal. So, the player character in Persona 3, an orphan with no home, no family, and no place in the world, slowly builds a new family. And, in doing so, you help those around you to heal from their own trauma surrounding loss and grief. Because ultimately, this is the message of Persona 3 Reload: to learn to embrace death and to rise above it. That is the moral of the story. That is why Persona 3 Reload matters.
It really does, and what feels bad about the entirety of the Persona game is that it's actually, in my opinion, it's actually a healing experience that I feel a lot of people should experience if they've ever struggled with any sort of loss. And like you mentioned at some point, this is not just a loss of a loved one or, you know, a person in general. Sometimes people grieve lives that they could have had, or that they did have, that they no longer have, that they're fighting to go back to. And even in the stories that don't directly have this, oh, I lost this person or whatever, you can still feel this little bit of longing and regret and grief over their previous circumstances, or even something that they've never had. So I feel like this game really deserves to be put in some sort of a different media as well that would help people heal in a way. It would be a great book at the end of the day, because I think that it's so helpful. It's actually so helpful, but so many people will never experience it just because it's too long, just because it's a game, just because it's weeby, just because, you know, it has all these themes that people immediately don't want to talk about, like grief or loss or whatever. But I feel like if people just gave it a chance, they could learn so much from these stories. And I think that over time, as I was playing through as I was playing through Persona 3 Reload, I could notice that some people who were not into Persona were like, let me check out this game or whatever. They would get invested into one personal social link that sounds almost exactly like something that they experienced before, and I would get these people to come back into the stream next day and be like, oh, what's our rank in this social link? Are we gonna continue it today? Are we gonna finish it today or whatever? So people, like, as a streamer, this was my experience. People get attached to one or two social links, and you can exactly tell who has their favorite, social link, and who's really excited to see the ending. And this is one of the reasons why I want to go back and platinum Persona 3, because I feel like to everyone who's watched my Persona 3 experience, I didn't get to show every ending to every social link, and it would be so nice to give that conclusion, first of all, to myself, and then to everyone else. For the people at least who were invested into one of these stories and we never got to finish it. Persona 2 has a strong emphasis on death, no details, but you could guess from the title. What's the full title actually? Yeah, people grieve, jobs, opportunities. Exactly. The scene of Akihiko Persona Revolution. Oh my god, don't even go there. Like, do you remember how I was crying watching that? Oh my god. Jojo, good morning, and Captain, good morning as well, or good day. How is everyone doing? Thank you for watching this video with me. I did want to share a little bit of hype for tomorrow's Persona 3 DLC release, and we're gonna be playing that here on the channel as well, and I will link the video in the description. I posted on YouTube as well later on, so that you can watch the original as well. Anyway, thanks for watching it with me, and now let's go play the game.